Hundreds of years ago, in what is now Richland County, Wisconsin, a young warrior of the Ho-Chunk Nation was summoned to the center of his village. He already knew why. 2 days earlier, 3 teenage boys had left to go deer hunting in the dense, rolling forests surrounding their home. They never came back. At first, the tribal chief had waited. It wasn't unusual for hunters, even young ones, to stay out overnight. But 48 hours had passed, and their families had a bad feeling. So now, standing in the village center, the chief had gathered the 10 strongest and bravest warriors, and asked this young warrior to lead them. He agreed, though privately, he believed this was unnecessary. The boys were likely camping somewhere, embarrassed to return empty-handed. Still, he would not question the chief. The warriors armed themselves, packed food and water, said their goodbyes, and stepped into the forest. They followed the familiar hunting trail, a path worn smooth by generations. The young warrior quickly found the boys' tracks. Fresh enough, clear. He felt reassured. This would be simple. They would find the boys, scold them, and return home before nightfall. But then, the tracks left the main trail. They veered into dense forest, an area not known for good hunting. The tribe knew these lands intimately. They knew where deer gathered. And this wasn't one of those places. The warriors exchanged uneasy glances. Still, they continued. Miles passed. The forest grew thicker, stranger, and something else troubled the young warrior. The tracks never stopped. There were no signs the boys had paused to rest. No scattered footprints where they had waited. No signs of a hunt. No signs of a struggle. Just 3 steady sets of tracks, moving in the same direction. As if the boys were walking with purpose. As if they were being led somewhere. The young warrior didn't say it aloud. But something was wrong. Very wrong. And whatever waited deeper in those woods. It wasn't deer. Oh, this is getting good. I'll tighten it, sharpen the tension, and build toward that realization in a cinematic YouTube format. After hours of tracking the boys deeper and deeper into the wilderness, the warriors reached the edge of a ravine. They stopped. They had gone farther than any of them had ever traveled before. This wasn't just off the beaten path. This was unknown land, untouched, unfamiliar, dangerous. And yet, the tracks continued, straight down into the ravine. So they followed. At the bottom, the forest suddenly thinned. And there it was, a cave, dark, wide, silent. The boys' tracks led directly inside. But there were no tracks coming out. The warriors stepped closer. Even with daylight behind them, they couldn't see far inside. The darkness swallowed everything beyond a few yards. The young warrior felt it now. Apprehension. This place wasn't known to them. They didn't know what lived inside. They didn't know what had drawn the boys here. Predator, trap, something worse. He made a decision. 2 men would go in. The rest would wait outside. The 2 warriors entered the cave, calling out the boys' names. Their voices echoed. No answer. From outside, the others could see them for a moment, then the darkness consumed them. But they could still hear them shouting, calling, searching. Then, the voices stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The cave went completely silent. 5 minutes passed. Nothing. 10 minutes. Nothing. 15. Still silence. No movement. No sound. No echo. Just stillness. The young warrior told the others to stay put. He stepped into the cave entrance. Just far enough for the darkness to press against him. He called out the names of the 2 men. His voice echoed deep into what now felt like a vast, endless chamber. No response. At least, not at first. Then he heard it. A sound. Deep inside the cave. A wailing. At first, it sounded like one voice. Then 2. Then many. Layered together. Overlapping. Like a chorus of suffering. The warrior froze. Because suddenly, he understood what he was hearing. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't wind. It wasn't spirits. It was human. Those were the voices of the boys. And the 2 men, all wailing together, from somewhere far below. And none of them were calling for help. They were screaming, "Oh, this is powerful. The escalation is perfect. I'll keep it tight, cinematic, and emotionally heavy for YouTube pacing." The sound wasn't screaming. It wasn't crying. It was chanting. A very specific chant. The young warrior felt the blood drain from his face. He knew that song. Every man standing behind him knew it too. It was the Ho-Chunk death song, the chant warriors sang before they died. And it was echoing from deep inside the cave. The 7 men behind him surged forward. "We have to go in." Before he could stop them, 6 of them rushed past him into the darkness. They disappeared inside, shouting for their brothers. The death song continued, reverberating off the stone walls. Layered, rhythmic, haunting. Then, silence. Total silence. No chanting. No voices. Nothing. Now only the young warrior and 1 other man remained at the mouth of the cave. They stood frozen, listening, waiting. Then it started again. The death song. But this time, it was louder, stronger. Not just a few voices. Dozens. Layered together in a deep, synchronized rhythm. As if the cave itself was singing. The young warrior felt the weight of responsibility crush down on him. Honor demanded he go in. Code demanded he sacrifice himself if necessary. But logic whispered something else. If they went in, they would not come out. And no one would ever know what happened. So against every instinct in his body, he turned, and ran, miles back to the village. By the time they arrived, it was dark. Breathless, shaking, they told the tribal chief everything. The missing boys, the cave, the death song, the men swallowed by darkness. The chief listened. Then said calmly, "At first light, we go back." Quote, the next morning, nearly 100 members of the village followed the chief, the young warrior, and the lone survivor back through the forest. They retraced every step, down into the ravine, to the cave. It was quiet, still, no tracks had come back out. Everyone who entered, was still inside. The young warrior's heart pounded. He didn't know how they could possibly go in without losing more lives. But the tribal chief stepped forward. He looked at the dark opening, and said, "I have a plan." Quote, the tribal chief stepped forward. "We do not go in one by one," he said. "We go as one." Quote, they would form a single line. Lock hands. No one lets go. The 2 men who had survived the day before would lead them back to where they heard the chanting. Together, unified, unbreakable. The plan felt solid, safe, brilliant. The line formed. Nearly 100 people, hand in hand. The man who had fled the cave the day before stood at the very front. Behind him was the young warrior. Behind him, the rest of the village. When they were ready, they stepped inside. The cave swallowed them. 50 feet in, the tunnel bent sharply to the right. The last bit of daylight vanished. Beyond that turn, pitch black. No glow, no outline, nothing. The young warrior blinked, straining to see. But the darkness was absolute. He gripped the hands in front of him and behind him as tightly as he could. A signal. We are together. We are strong. We are not afraid. The line shuffled forward, slowly, carefully. The walls tightened around them. The air felt heavy. Then, from deep inside the cave, the death song began again. Low, slow, rhythmic. It echoed through the stone, vibrating in their chests. Booming, layered, building louder, and louder. The chant of warriors facing death. But there were far too many voices now. The line kept moving. They were too deep to turn around quickly. Too connected to run. The young warrior squeezed the leader's hand harder. Keep going. We can do this. Then, the grip in his right hand went slack. The hand in front of him slipped away. He lunged forward instinctively. But there was nothing there. No body, no sound, no struggle, just empty air. The line leader was gone, vanished. Now the young warrior stood at the front of the line. In total darkness, the death song roaring around him. And for the first time, he wanted to turn and run. Perfect. This is the legend's ending. Tragic, haunting, and mythic. I'll deliver a tight, cinematic conclusion with emotional weight and a lingering final note. The young warrior stood at the front of the line. The man before him had vanished. The death song thundered through the darkness. He wanted to turn. He wanted to run. But something held him there. Not hands. Not honor. Something else. A pull. A force drawing him deeper into the black. And before he could stop himself, he opened his mouth and began chanting the death song. Outside the cave, the tribal chief and a few others had stayed behind. They could hear something inside. Dull echoes. Movement. But nothing clear. Then, chaos. Screaming. Panic. Footsteps pounding against stone. Suddenly, villagers came flooding out of the cave. Terrified. Shaking. Some crying. Some unable to speak. The chief gathered them. Counted again. Over a dozen were missing. Gone. Swallowed by the darkness. And the cave was silent again. The chief made a decision. There is something evil inside that place. Quote, something that takes our people. Quote, no one enters again. Quote, they returned to the village. And they waited. Days passed. No one came back. Weeks passed. Still nothing. No bodies. No answers. No closure. Just an empty ravine in a silent cave. The mystery tore through the tribe. Grief without burial. Loss without understanding. Months later, the chief gave one final order. The cave would be sealed. They rolled massive boulders into place. Stone by stone, blocking the entrance forever. It would become a tomb. And it would never claim another life. Oh, this is perfect. Now we shift from legend to evidence. I'll keep it cinematic, eerie, and build that bridge between folklore and modern discovery. For generations, the Ho-Chunk Nation passed down the story of the cave, of the warriors, of the death song echoing in darkness. Some believed it, some thought it was just folklore, a warning story, a myth to keep children from wandering too far. Until 1930, a man named Paul Seaffort was hiking through the rolling forests of Richland County, Wisconsin. He was an antique dealer. And he had a habit. He liked searching for indigenous artifacts, arrowheads, pottery, anything he could resell. On this particular day, he was far off any known trail. Deep in the hills, that's when he spotted it. Across a ravine, a strange mound of rocks. Not natural, stacked, deliberate, moss-covered, old. He climbed down into the ravine and began pulling stones away. It didn't take long to realize. This had been sealed intentionally. Behind the rocks was a cave. It took work to clear enough space to squeeze inside. But eventually, he managed. And standing at the entrance, looking into the darkness, one thought crossed his mind. Why would someone block this off? His imagination ran wild. Maybe untouched artifacts. Maybe relics from centuries ago. Treasure hidden in stone. Excited, he left, returned with supplies, and most importantly, a lantern. On his second visit, he stepped inside. The air was stale, cold, still. He walked roughly 50 feet in. Then the tunnel bent sharply to the right. Beyond that turn, total darkness. He raised his lantern and followed the passage. The ceiling began lowering. The walls tightened around him. It was becoming narrow, cramped, claustrophobic. But he kept going, because this cave had been sealed for a reason. And whatever was inside, no one had seen it in hundreds of years. For generations, the Ho-Chunk Nation told a story. A story about warriors, teenagers, entire groups of people, swallowed alive by a cave. Some believed it, some called it folklore. No one truly knew. Until 1930, in Richland County, Wisconsin, an antique dealer named Paul Seaffort was hiking through the rolling hills, searching for indigenous artifacts, arrowheads, pottery, fragments of the past he could sell in his shop. That's when he found it. A ravine, a clearing, and a strange mound of rocks that didn't belong. He pulled them away. Behind them, a sealed cave. Someone had blocked it on purpose. Curious and excited, Paul returned with a lantern. If this cave had been hidden, there had to be something valuable inside. He stepped into the darkness. The tunnel narrowed. The ceiling dropped. Soon, he was crawling. Then suddenly, it opened. A massive cavern, cathedral-like, silent. He lifted his lantern, and froze. Rows. Perfect rows of human skeletons. Kneeling. Hands raised over their heads, as if bowing. Praying. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. All facing the same direction. Paul slowly turned his light to where they were bowing. Carved into the stone wall. An enormous throne. Empty. No treasure. No artifacts. Just bones. And a seat meant for something. Paul ran. He never took a single thing. He later told his story to the Milwaukee Journal, and it was published, linking his discovery to the ancient legend of the Ho-Chunk people. But nearly a century later, two questions remain. What happened to those people? And who Or what once sat on that throne?